It started, well, when Russia invaded Ukraine and we started hearing all these stories about Ukrainians who were mostly women and children who were fleeing. I just started thinking there's certainly going to be a need for books in Poland. All of these schools in Poland have absorbed 1.1 million Ukrainian children and opened their arms to receive them. And so, what can we do to help?
Howdy, and welcome to One for the Books, a show about all things bookish. I'm your host, Sandra Broadwell. On this episode, I'll be highlighting the International Book Project, a nonprofit whose mission is to develop lasting partnerships with educators and underserved communities to provide books, promote literacy, and advance opportunity. My guest today is Executive Director Lisa Fryman. A native of Southern California, Lisa holds a BA in International Relations from Stanford University and an MBA in Finance from UCLA. Her interest in international affairs and business development has led to a varied and fulfilling career, from Fortune 500 companies to raising a family in Kentucky, working as a volunteer and board member for a multitude of philanthropic and charitable projects, and managing a congressional campaign. Lisa is an avid reader since childhood and believes literacy opens doors to all worlds of opportunity. Lisa, thank you so much for taking the time to have a conversation with me. I know the International Book Project has been super busy with some really cool projects lately, so I'm so glad you could take the time.
Thanks so much for having me, Sandra. This is a welcome break. Let's put it that way.
Oh, good. So last year was the International Book Project's 55th anniversary. Can you talk a little bit about the mission and how the organization has changed over the years?
Well, I've only been here for 6 years, so I am speaking from archive information and things like that. We were started in 1966 by Harriet Van Meter, who lived here in Lexington, and she went on a trip to India with some University of Kentucky students, and she saw people standing in line, thought they were standing in line for food, and was told, no, they're standing in line to get books. There's not enough books. So she was appalled by this and came home and took out an ad in an English-speaking newspaper in Delhi, I believe, and said, my name is Harriet Van Meter, and I live in Lexington, Kentucky, and if you would like to receive free books from me, tell me what kind of books you would like to receive, and I will send them to you. And then she rounded up all her friends to give her donated books, and she started in her basement, and it grew and grew and grew. She got 400 responses to that ad. Wow. And so she was launched, and it just continued initially with India and then countries all over the world. She outgrew her basement in the mid 80s and bought the warehouse on Delaware Avenue where we are now. And about right before our 50th anniversary, we gutted the whole warehouse and completely renovated it into a much more functional and modern space. And so here we are today. We've shipped almost 8 million books since 1966 and to 168 different countries. So we have certainly covered the globe.
That's amazing. 168 countries. Wow. That's most of the countries on the planet. That's really incredible. Can you talk about how do those relationships develop? Like, how do you find the international places where to ship books to, and like, how does that happen?
Well, I think a lot of it has grown out of Harriet's initial vision, where she established relationships with schools, churches, Peace Corps volunteers, universities, and they would send her letters back then of the kind of books that they would want to receive. Now we're a little more streamlined on the internet, and people fill out applications for the kind of books they want. And so it's much easier now than it was, and we can respond much more quickly. But some of those relationships continue. A gentleman come in here the year that I started in 2016, and he was from Zambia, and his village, when he was young, received a box of books from International Book Project, and he ended up coming to graduate school here and was wanting to continue that relationship and send books again back to his village. So we have a lot of stories like that are great.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
So people just hear about you these days, it seems like, and come to you.
They come to us. They, if you Google, how do I get free books or whatever it is, we usually pop up there on the first page. And a lot of it is word of mouth. Like one year we sent books to a Peace Corps volunteer in Peru, and about 6 months later, they had requested books from us, and we send small boxes of books to really remote locations, generally where Peace Corps volunteers are. And about 6 months later, we got 9 requests from Peace Corps volunteers in Peru.
Oh,
So
wow.
obviously, when that one Peace Corps volunteer got their books, they told everyone else to go ahead and do it. So it's like that.
That's awesome. You said over 8 million books that you've shipped so far in your storied history of your organization. You normally send small boxes, but what sorts of books do you ship?
Well, we ship all sorts of books. We ship really what sets us apart from other organizations that ship books is that we only ship people books that they ask us for. So they fill out an application. Once they found us, we send them an application. And in that, we ask them, how many books do you need? Do you want to receive a container of books, which may be 20 to 40,000 books? Do you want to receive a pallet of books, which is 1 to 2,000 books? Or do you need something smaller than that? And generally, if you're getting a pallet or a container, it's going as ocean freight. Sometimes as air freight, but mostly as ocean freight. And so partner has to have the ability to clear it through customs and all that kind of thing, which requires a little bit higher level of sophistication. We also continue Harriet's initial vision of sending small boxes of really curated books to those remote locations, to small organizations. And, you know, if you're a village in Nepal and we send you 200 books, it may not seem like a lot to us, but it can create a library. It can stock a school with textbooks. You know, it can make a huge difference, even just a small shipment like that.
That's incredible. I know you said the organization started in Harriet Van Meter's basement, and I read on your website that she was nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize in 1986 for her efforts to increase world literacy. How long was she involved with the organization?
I believe she retired sometime in the late 80s, early 90s.
Nice. I got your newsletter and it said you raised $16,000 to
We're
send
up
a
to
sea
17.
container. 17,000. That's awesome. It's gone up. Okay, so you've raised over $17,000 to send a sea container of over 40,000 books to Poland for Ukrainian refugee children.
Yes.
Tell me about that initiative. How did that start?
It started, well, when Russia invaded Ukraine and we started hearing all these stories about Ukrainians who were mostly women and children who were fleeing to Poland primarily, but to other surrounding countries. Poland received the most Ukrainians. You know, I just started thinking it doesn't make sense to send books into a war-torn country, obviously, but we had shipped books to Poland before, so I knew we could do it. And I thought there's certainly going to be a need for books in Poland. All of these schools in Poland have absorbed 1.1 million Ukrainian children and opened their arms to receive them. And so, you know, what can we do to help? And I have a friend here, Kasia Potter, who is from Poland. And so I called her and I said, what do you think of this idea? Does this make sense to you? Do you have contacts in Poland? And the next day she got back to me with this whole long list.
Oh, wow.
Through her contacts, someone who runs the book fair in Krakow recommended an organization called the Universal Reading Foundation over there. And their mission is early literacy, children kindergarten through, say, 3rd grade, and just creating a culture of reading in Poland. And so I got in touch with her, Maria Deskur, and said, do you think this is a need? You know, where would we go to find someone to receive the books? And she said, we're organizing all sorts of things like this. We'll receive the books. We can distribute the books. So that was a great accomplishment, because sometimes it's hard to find someone who's able to receive a very large shipment of books. And because she had the ability to get them distributed to schools, that was a huge plus. So from there, we sent out a letter, as we do every spring, but this was a really great story and a good ask for people. You know, everyone has heard and is following what's going on in Lexington or Central Kentucky has a large Ukrainian population from refugees who came in the late 90s and early 2000s. So we sent this letter out, and we immediately, 2 days after the letter letter went out, we started getting money and we started getting people donating books, and we had classrooms around Central Kentucky doing book drives and that sort of thing.
Wow.
So it's really been a community effort.
That's really inspiring. So you've raised $17,000 so far. How much does it normally cost to ship a sea container of 40,000 books?
Well, it used to be a whole lot cheaper than it is now.
I'm sure.
Normally it would cost about $10,000. It's probably doubled just because of fuel costs and the supply chain and shortages of containers. Lots of containers are stuck in China and on the routes from Asia to California. So the war in Ukraine has created an additional demand that's putting pressure on all those supply chains. We found a shipper in Atlanta who is coordinating a lot of relief going to Poland and Ukraine. So that was really, really great. And they offered to cover some of the cost of the shipping, which has been a huge relief to us. And it's also freed up some of our donation money and our grant money to have books printed in Ukrainian to supplement the books in English that we are sending. The Ukrainian publishers and authors in Ukraine have given printers in Poland the free rights to print books in Ukrainian for Ukrainian families. And so basically the cost is the cost of paper. So, any amount of money that we can send them is maybe $1 a book, which is great, would be the cost of printing. So we're now supplementing our container shipment with some funds to enable the Universal Reading Foundation to print those books in Ukrainian.
Wow. So how does that normally work, shipping to all sorts of different countries? Do you normally ship books in English? How does that work?
Yeah, we ship people what they ask us for. Most people, I would say 98% of our partners request books in English. English is really the universal language of, our world economy and all these things. Sometimes Latin America, South America, Central America, they want books in Spanish. And so we always have a shortage of books in Spanish and are trying to source those because really, I would say 80% of the books they want are in Spanish, and we're able to do that. Some countries in French West Africa want books in French as well, but we don't really have requests for books in other languages aside from Spanish and a little bit of French.
Interesting. So where do all the books come from that you ship?
Mostly from Central Kentucky, which is amazing when you think of all the books that we get in. From schools, from teachers who are acquiring new books, and they have classroom sets of books, which are always great because in a lot of countries, you'll have 5 children sharing one book. So if we're able to ship a classroom set, then every child gets a book, which is really great. So we have schools as a source of books. We have public libraries as a source of books. They're constantly culling through their collections, and so they know what kind of books we want. The Lexington Public Library, Madison County, Scott County libraries, they will send us books a couple of times a year. Fayette County schools, they have a huge warehouse full of textbooks, and so they know that there are certain kinds of textbooks that we want, and so we can always call on them to have books sent to us. And then we just have a lot of individual donors, especially during COVID, everybody was reading, and now we are inundated with books. People are cleaning out their bookshelves. Older people are downsizing, or family member has died and the family is cleaning out their library. So oftentimes we'll get huge donations of books. But, for example, today, somebody brought 2 bags of children's books, and they were all pretty new, which is great to send to Ukraine.
Yeah, that's awesome. If someone was interested in donating books to you guys, what are the requirements?
Well, it's on our website, intlbookproject.org, but we generally take any kind of fiction book from a board book for a 3-year-old up through adult. We'll take biographies. Sometimes it's easier to say what we do not take. So we do not take old cookbooks. We do not want your 1960 Betty Crocker microwave cookbook. We don't take gardening books because flora and fauna are different throughout the world. So a gardening book for Central Kentucky doesn't help somebody in Africa. Same thing with cookbooks. Measurements are different. Oven temperatures are Celsius instead of Fahrenheit. We don't take a lot of American books, the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, we don't have requests for those.
Right. That makes sense.
We take university books if they're not outdated, political science, any kind of STEM book, medical books, nursing books, a world history book or a constitutional law book, that would be appropriate for a university library. We do ship those. Any kind of like classroom readers, a lot of teachers acquire those. Any kind of book on, and we never have enough of these, like books on grammar, writing, English, if you were learning English, a book teaching you grammar and things like that. So we love those kinds of books.
Nice. And you said you've been the executive director for 6 years now. What would you say is like the biggest change that's happened since you've become the director?
Oh my gosh. The biggest change has been the renovation of our building, which we started in 2017. So when I got here, it was the original building that Mrs. Van Meter bought in 1985, I believe. And it had been tile factory. They made bathroom tiles, which I know because a woman came in donating books and told me that it was her father's tile factory and she used to play here when she was little. And so it was all, we have a concrete floor, but there were all these different levels and slopes, and it was horrible for what we did because people were carrying boxes and tripping and all that kind of thing. And the back side of the building, which backs up to the railroad tracks behind Delaware Avenue, had families of groundhogs living underneath it. So that back of the building was a little bit compromised. And we had an endowment that we had never tapped into, which was significant. And so it was just, we were kind of getting to the point where we had to decide, do we tear the building down and build a new building? Do we renovate this building, which is a really cool, the roof is like a barrel shape, like an airplane hangar.
Yeah.
Do we renovate it, or do we sell the property, which we own, and move somewhere else? So we had a long 6 or 9 month board discussion about that and kind of costing out all the different alternatives. One real problem I saw is that we've been here for so long and everybody knows where we are. We have 3 generations of supporters of International Book Project, and we're close to New Circle Road. So for high school students doing volunteer work and for UK students coming, we are in a really, really great location. The other thing was that Delaware Avenue was really starting to kind of undergo a renaissance with a lot of new restaurants and breweries and things like that coming in. So it felt like we needed to stay here for a lot of reasons. And honestly, the least expensive alternative was just gutting the building to the outside walls, fixing everything from an engineering point of view, and rebuilding it. So the architect we hired was in the building next door to us, which was really convenient. And they had a series of what they call charrettes, which was the most fun thing I think I have almost ever done in my life, where for a whole day, all the staff and the board met, and the architects divided us into, I think, 3 groups. And they just said, if money were no object in a perfect world, how would you want your physical surroundings to look, to operate? What do you need? What don't you have? What do you have that you don't need? All this kind of stuff. And they just had poster, giant sticky notes all over the walls and just wrote all this stuff down. And it was so much fun to just kind of think out of the box. The building from the front had no windows. It had a pull down garage door. So we really didn't have a lot of street visibility. It was all, we had all these different little rooms. It was all chopped up. The warehouse had, maybe 9 racks of books with only 3 feet in between them. So you could barely get a dolly, much less a forklift. And the way books came in was really inefficient. People would donate books. We would sort them and put them on shelves. And then when we were packing them, you had to go back to those shelves and find the books that were requested and pack them. And so it was a mess. So one thing we wanted was visibility from the street, so everyone knew that we were here. And windows, we all wanted more light because it was very, very dark. And we wanted to have more of a public space. We have a really nice little used bookstore, but it was in like 3 different rooms, and there were steps up and steps down. And we have a lot of older people, and people were tripping all the time, and it was very crowded. So we wanted to open that all up and have a public space where we could have events, where other people could come and have events or book clubs, things like that. We also wanted a place where volunteers could take a break and get a snack and all that. So that turned into a whole really wonderful conversation. And you've been here, so you've seen our sea container. We went and bought an old sea container. There's a sea container graveyard on Old Frankfort Pike. So I went with contractor when we picked one out, and you can do an ancestry.com on a sea container by tracing all the numbers and find out what is the history of the sea container. So we found one that had been all through Southeast Asia, Korea, Japan, Philippines, and we painted it. It was kind of a grubby old green color, and we painted it our bright IBP yellow, and they cut the side out of it, and we turned it into a little kitchenette with a bar, so people could come in and picture it filled with books, because it is an actual sea container. And then they can also, there's a refrigerator and a microwave and place to sit down, and so people could have their snacks and take a break. And that's been a real highlight of the redesign. And then back in the warehouse, we took out a lot of the racks that we had that were tall, almost to the ceiling racks. They're maybe 15 feet high, and totally redid them because they were rusty and some were not really structurally sound anymore. So we created, instead of like 6 rows, we have 2 rows, and then we took what was left and put it all around the perimeter, and we can store packed pallets on the floor underneath and then 2 levels up, which is really great. So now the idea is the books come in through the big open common space, and they go back into the warehouse where they are sorted by genre. So we have elementary school textbooks, elementary school library books, middle school, high school, college level STEM and humanities, nursing books, medical books, and then general library books, which are adult fiction, maybe a few biographies and things like that. So they all are sorted into these bins, and then we have an army of volunteers who come in and they pack out of those bins. And so once we have packed a pallet, which is 28 boxes and it's kind of a cube, then we store it on these racks. And so when we get a request for books now, we don't have to go search for those books and repack them once they've been shelved. So that's worked really well. And there's now more of a flow where books come in one way and they're packed and they go out another way. So that has been the major change. We found windows on an interior wall that were beautiful old casement windows when we ripped everything out. And so we pulled those out and had them all refurbished. And so those are the 4 big windows that are like, 4.5 foot squares across the front of the building.
Nice.
And then we have big glass doors and huge 2 foot tall letters that say International Book Project. And a donor had, our logo is a folded paper airplane. And so a donor donated the money to create a metal paper airplane art sculpture, which is on the front of the building.
That's awesome. I have lived in and around this neighborhood for 7 or 8 years on and off. And I remember when your all sign went up on the outside of the building, because I had no idea you existed before that. My eyes just like slid past that building. It just looks like a warehouse. But I remember when that sign went up, I was like, oh, what's this cool new organization? And it was
How did you know?
It's been there the whole time. I just didn't know. Kudos. And I was super thrilled to come in and do the tour and get the footage of the inside. It is such a beautiful space.
They did a great job. And one of the really cool things is the architect, the ceiling was only we had 8-foot ceilings. And then there was an attic that was just filled with, literally, we found every canceled check that Harriet Van Meter ever wrote were in boxes in this attic. There was a lifetime supply of Christmas decorations. There were all her old ledgers that were handwritten in perfect penmanship, like people used to learn. So we had all of this stuff that we had to kind of pull through and decide what to keep and what not to keep. So that was a really fun thing. And when they went up in the attic, they took all these old beams, huge 2x4s or whatever they are, and constructed all of the tables and cabinets and the bar in the kitchenette. So we have a little bit of the old warehouse in all of our conference tables, which is great.
That's really meaningful. That's really cool that they could do that for you. What has been your favorite part of being executive director of the International Book Project? Do you have one memory that stands out, or your favorite thing to do as part of your job?
Oh my gosh. I mean, there's so much. One thing that was a real highlight right before COVID, before the pandemic hit, we had put together a project with Peace Peace Corps. So we normally would send small boxes that are sort of 12-inch cubes to Peace Corps volunteers in really remote locations. And we wanted to expand our relationship with the Peace Corps. We had a board chair who was in the original group of Peace Corps volunteers in the 60s, and two other Peace Corps volunteers, one of whom was younger, who's now our current board chair. And so we wanted to expand that relationship with the Peace Corps. And we had this idea from the Peru thing where we had all the one shipment and then the 6 other Peace Corps volunteers that wanted books to bundle, like in a country or a region, a Peace Corps shipment. Because if you ship a pallet, you can ship a lot more books for less money. So we found a group of Peace Corps volunteers in Morocco, and we bundled about 10 of them together and sent them a pallet of, I don't know, it was like 5,000 books. And so they were shipped out, and then the director of operations and I went to Morocco to meet all those Peace Corps volunteers when the pallet of books arrived. And we all got together, and they had sent us requests, and so the boxes were kind of packed for each one of them. And I mean, some of them were way up in the Atlas Mountains, you know, on dirt roads, and, you know, they had to load these boxes on the little buses and things that get them up there. So that was a real highlight, to just sort of see a project from the very beginning when the books came into us to where they ended up, you know, and meeting the little kids in the schools who were going to enjoy the books. That was really, really fun.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. What a special experience.
Yeah. And we have a lot of volunteer groups. We have corporate volunteer groups, and we have church groups that come in. Second Presbyterian, which was Harriet Van Meter's church, has volunteers that come from Ohio and Michigan every year to Kentucky, and they stay for a week or two, and they do service projects with nonprofits all around Lexington. So I loved that before the pandemic, we would have kids who started coming to International Book Project when they were in 6th grade, and now they were in high school, and it was their favorite summer project to travel to and volunteer. So that was kind of fun. I mean, there's so much.
Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine. Well, since you brought up the pandemic, how did that affect your all's kind of day-to-day operations? And do you feel like you're back to normal, whatever that means for you at this point?
It was terrible. I was on vacation in California right when everything started. You know, there were cruise ships where they were quarantining people in San Francisco and all that. Yeah. So when I came home, I got on the plane, and there were people with those big gas masks on. I mean, nobody knew like how bad this was.
Right.
I didn't have a mask. I had, you know, like a baggie of Clorox wipes from my mother's house, and I was disinfecting everything.
Yeah.
And I got home, and I called a friend whose brother is an infectious disease doctor, and I said, you know, is this a thing? What should we be doing? And she said, I'll ask him. And her response to me that night was, he says we should all be staying home, which like kind of shocked me. So we had kind of an emergency board meeting, and this was maybe like on a Tuesday or a Wednesday. And that next Monday we shut down, and, you know, we put a social media post, and I think we maybe were the first ones, because shortly after that, all the other nonprofits shut down. And that was like early mid-March, I think.
Yep.
And so we just worked from home. I mean, we did not come in at all until the next July or August. So maybe 6 months. And then we came in shifts. So we really were closed down to book donations. Once we started, and, you know, one of us would come and check the mail and things like that, but we really were not working.
Yeah.
And then we were coming in shifts, like 4-hour shifts, and just everyone would be in their office with a mask on, and we still were not taking donations. People still would drop stuff off, and so we would sanitize them and bring them in, you know, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. And then probably we all started coming back fall of 2020. We started coming back, but just masking and having people leave their books outside and making appointments. So we just didn't have too many books, because by that time, people had kind of gotten into cleaning frenzies in their house. And we were getting a lot of books and a lot of messages. Can I drop off books and all that kind of thing?
Yeah.
And then once we started, and we had no volunteers at all. And so once people started getting vaccinated in early 2021. We have a lot of retired volunteers, and so they were the first ones to get vaccinated. So when our staff was able to get vaccinated, and then we had this core group of retired volunteers, they started coming back, and there was a lot to do. And, when we were able to ship books, then everything overseas was closed down. And when they started opening up, we were closed down. So it really was just a cascade of unfortunate events.
Right.
And then, we started getting some school groups. We decided that we would have a vaccine mandate. So if you wanted to come into the building, just to protect our older volunteers and to just for the staff to not have to worry, maybe 3 people have objected to it. Most people say thank you. And now everyone, has a picture of their card on their phone, or it's just sort of become a way of life. And so I feel like, knock on wood, we're back to normal in kind of an adjusted way. I mean, the thing I worry about is, number one, the supply chain is a mess. So even when we're ready to ship books, we have a lot of books that we can ship out and we just can't book the shipment. And the postal service, all these small shipments used to go through the postal service, and it's just not reliable. And, books aren't arriving at their destinations. They're getting stolen. So now we've had to ship fewer books, but with more of an assurance that they'll get there by shipping through UPS or DHL or post office priority, where we can track the shipment and know that it arrives. So there's all those kind of complications, but I feel like we're able to, navigate through those and deal with them.
Yeah, I can't imagine just trying to, all the different regulations for different countries and how each one was shutting down at different times and stuff. That must have been a nightmare to navigate.
We would ship books with a tracking number. So we thought they would get there. For example, we had a shipment going, I think, to Zimbabwe, and it was several boxes, and it's like $300 or $400 a box to ship it through a courier with a tracking number. So they all went off, and maybe 6 months ago, we're starting to get some of them back because they were getting to Australia, which was maybe a point where they arrived at a clearinghouse and then were sorted at what's going to Asia, what's going to Africa. And because Australia's postal service was shut down to anything coming from the United States, they sent it back to us. So it's weird things like that we were like, how did this end up in Australia? So I'm hoping that that's less of a problem going forward. We also have all these educational programs where we match up schools in Central Kentucky with classrooms overseas.
Yeah. Okay, good. I'm glad you brought that up. Books as Bridges,
Books as
right?
Bridges. And so that was a problem because when the schools were in session here and the kids exchange pen pal letters and we send them packages of books, and the schools here will do a service project for their partner school. It just fell apart because when they were in session here, all the schools overseas or in various parts were locked down. And then we would lock down and they would open up. So, God bless all these teachers who were having things sent to their homes. And a lot of the teachers overseas were trying to drop off letters at their children's houses. And even in Fayette County, teachers were doing that when the schools were locked down here. They were dropping these letters, driving to every student's house and dropping off the letters. So we tried to keep it going, but I now think for this fall that everyone will be back in school everywhere and that it won't be as much of a problem.
So in an ideal non-pandemic world, talk a little bit about how the Books as Bridges program works. How do those relationships develop between the local schools and the international schools?
So it started in 2008. So one of my predecessors started it, and it's really a cultural literacy program to teach children and expose children here and overseas to other cultures. And so we match up these classrooms, and then the children will exchange 3 sets of letters over the course of a school year. And when I started, we have a Books as Bridges coordinator. So it's one person who we have 50 classrooms here. So, they go to each one of those 50 classrooms classrooms and teach a cultural literacy lesson. So they talk about to the kids here about the partner country, if it's Kenya or Philippines or whatever, and just talk about all sorts of things, the arts, geography, music, what people wear, anything that would be different. And then also things that are similar. So we would have a partner classroom in South Africa that was in a mining community matched up with a classroom in Eastern Kentucky where there was coal mining. So they would have something in common to, or agricultural communities or things like that. So we then, that was really successful, but we never had enough time in that one lesson. So we then started a lesson in the springtime. So in the fall, the lesson is more kind of academic. So the coordinator would give an overview of the country. Is it bigger than Kentucky? Is it smaller than Kentucky? Is it agricultural? Is it urban? Whatever. And then in the spring, they go back and it's much more of a hands-on kind of thing where the kids here will get to do, for example, we had a high school class that did Chinese calligraphy because their partner classroom was in Taiwan and they love that.
Oh, cool.
They made like prayer flags like they do in Nepal and streamed them all through the hallways of Ashland Elementary School, which was really, really fun.
Oh, wow.
They made kintu cloths, from Kenya. So they do like an art project or a music project. So we have really generous funding from Toyota for that. And over the years, we've been able to acquire djembe drums and finger pianos and all sorts of little musical instruments that we could take to the classroom here. And every kid would get something, an instrument they could practice on. Art projects, all that kind of stuff. And then all through this time, they're exchanging letters. And then around Christmas time, I guess, we at International Book Project send each overseas classroom a box of books for their classroom. So those would be classroom sets, early readers, something that every child in that partner classroom could enjoy. And then in the spring, the classrooms here have a service project and it can be whatever they want it to be. We have third grade through high school classes. And we had a classroom a couple years ago in Tampa. So it's not just Central Kentucky, you can be anywhere. And they raised money for their classroom in Cameroon to pay for a borehole so they could have water in the school, which was a really wonderful thing. The Lexington school always has a book drive and they get thousands of books in their book drive, which is really great. So, the kids can just do whatever they want to do that they think will benefit their partner classroom. But wait, there's more. They also exchange a cultural package, and that's actually one of my most favorite things. So the kids overseas will pack up a package and send to their partner classroom, but everything comes here and we kind of go through it and make sure everything's appropriate. But they'll make bead bracelets or some kind of trinket, or they'll send, homemade candy and things like that to their partner classroom here. And then the kids here send things overseas. So I cannot tell you how many basketballs we have shipped overseas and horseshoes, which are expensive to ship overseas. And it's just something where the partner classroom will, know a little something about their Kentucky classmates.
That's so fun. I wish I had been able to participate in that program when I was in elementary school. That's so cool. Yeah. What a great experience for kids on both sides. That's really neat. So you guys run a couple of other programs. You have one called Globetrotters, which is a cost-free kids summer program. What does that involve? So
Globetrotters kind of evolved out of the Books as Bridges program. And usually the Books as Bridges program in the past, not anymore, was an AmeriCorps Vista volunteer that we had for the whole year. And they ran the Books as Bridges program. So the last Vista we had this great idea to have a summer camp that was kind of like Books as Bridges, but concentrated into 5 full days during the summer. That would be no cost.
Okay.
And she found a grant from the Bluegrass Community Foundation and organized a pilot program. So I think the first year we had maybe 6 kids and they came from 9 o'clock to 3 o'clock. And every day they went to a different region of the world and kind of studied about that region. We gave them each a book. So that evolved into a 1-session summer camp the next year because it was so successful. And then now we have expanded. Last year, even in the middle of COVID, we did 2 sessions. And this year we're doing 2 sessions here in Lexington. And then the Bluegrass Community Foundation has given us a grant to travel to Sharpsburg in Bath County to do another week on site there. So every kid, they get a little bag with an atlas in it. There's a passport, and we take their picture on the first day, and then they have a stamp from every country that they learn about all through the week. So at the end of the week, they have a collection of books from different parts of the world and an atlas and a journal that they can keep and stuff like that.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
I love that idea. Yeah. The other program that I read about on your website is called Books in the Bluegrass. And that one is a partnership between you guys and other local nonprofits like Habitat for Humanity and Kentucky Refugee Ministries and things like that. And you basically provide books to families in need. Is that right?
Yeah. So and a bookshelf. So we have a lot of local grants, and it kind of changes every year. LG&E, the Rotary, the Junior League, Bluegrass Community Foundation, lots of people and corporations will give us money, and we buy a bookshelf that's like a 3-shelf bookshelf that's maybe, 3.5 feet tall. And then we stock it with books. So every new Habitat house gets a bookshelf from us. Every refugee family that comes through Kentucky Refugee Ministries. And now we've expanded to DVA Kitchen, Movable Feast. We're adding some other partners this year. One year we had veterans who had housing insecurity and were finally placed in their own apartments, and they will fill out an application, or the organization sponsoring them will let us know it's a family of 4. There's a 10-year-old boy, a 3-year-old girl, whatever it is. And so all the books on the bookshelf are curated for the interests and ages and genders of the kids and family members.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's really fun.
Yeah, I bet. But the bookstore that you guys have, how do you get the books for your bookstore, and how are those books different from the books that you ship overseas?
They're not really all that different, except maybe some of the genres that we don't ship overseas. So we have a big section of Kentucky books, and that's really popular with people that come to shop in the bookstore. Some of them are new books by current authors. Some of them are old, more antique kind of Kentucky books.
Yeah.
We have a whole history section, so we wouldn't ship, but that's really popular. A lot of retired people like to come and shop in the history section. We have a cookbook section. So if somebody donates a cookbook that's a brand new cookbook, we would put it in the bookstore. So the hardback books are generally $5 and the paperback books are $3. And all of those donations go to help fund our shipping.
That's awesome.
So and then we have kids books. We have a whole wall of fiction books. And it's pretty popular, and during the pandemic, we had people who were regular who come every single week, and we were closed, so that was not good. And then when we opened up, they all came flooding back.
That's awesome. Where would you say International Book Project is going next? What are your organizational goals for the future? Do you have more programs, more infrastructure? Like, what's coming down the pipeline?
We're a really small organization. We have 3 full-time employees, the director of operations who runs the warehouse and all the shipping, a director of development for fundraising, and myself. And then we have the Books as Bridges coordinator is a part-time position. The only real way that we can expand is to have more funding for just these operational expenses like salaries. And I'm sure every nonprofit has the same problem. People want to give money for a specific project, and the Ukraine project is a perfect example. Everybody steps up and does all that, but we can only do so many of those with so many people. So we're always looking around for grants that fund, just general overhead.
Jill mentioned when I was there that you guys are hoping to do something with your outdoor space. Can you talk about that?
I can. So between our building and the building next door is this, I don't know, maybe a 25 foot wide strip that's just weeds. And we've had the Globetrotters program inside here, but you can imagine with 10, 3rd and 4th graders that it gets a little bit crazy when we have books coming in and volunteers, and then we have all these kids. And so we've tried for the last couple of years to get a grant to pave it over, because it's just gravel and, weeds that are 2 feet high, to pave it over and use that as an outside space for Globetrotters for all of the activities. Kids need to run around, and we have these messy art activities and science experiments and things like that. So we just found out that we got a grant from the Kentucky Colonels, so we're going to be able to do that.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah, hopefully in the fall we'll start at the end of the summer and when it's not wet and muggy.
So you're planning kind of like an outdoor classroom play area type of
activity activity area, but we'll also be able, when we have events, to do things out there. Book clubs could come. I think we're applying for another grant to get a big table and maybe some sort of a pergola or awning feature to provide some shade, because it's all in the sun. There's one part that is not gravel, but it's like a flat concrete slab that's attached, that has a door into the building. So that would be a really great thing to just enable us to expand a lot of our programming and activities and fundraisers and neighborhood things, all that kind of stuff.
That's super exciting.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
I know. We're grateful for that. We've tried for like 3 years in a row, so this is great.
Yeah. What do you hope to be the legacy of your time as executive director?
Oh my gosh. Well, number one,
that's a hard question.
Number one, the new warehouse. I feel like that is a huge thing. And, I feel like since we did the renovation, we've really tried to get our name out into the broader Lexington community so people know what we do. We have no shortage of requests for books from overseas. And so the more we can get our local community involved, the more books we'll be able to ship. So, we've tried lots of things like this podcast and news shows and outreach and all that kind of thing. So hopefully that will get our name out there more. And, Lexington has grown a lot since 1966. And it used to be, someone said to me, everybody knew about International Book Project in the 1980s because it was a really small, I didn't live here, it was a really small town. And now there's been so much growth that we have people all the time coming and saying, I had no idea that you were here. I just had no idea anyone did this kind of thing. So I think getting that word out to our much larger now city is one thing that I'm hoping to do.
Yeah, definitely. So I just have 2 questions left. Second to last question is, what is the best book that you have read in the last year?
Oh my gosh. Well, I don't know if the best book is always the last book you read, but my daughter gave me this book called The Plot, like the plot of a book, which was sitting on my coffee table with a huge stack of all the other books that she gave me. And about a month ago, my other daughter came, and she's a big reader, and said, I have just read the best book. You need to read this book called The Plot. And I said, like that one on my coffee table I haven't read yet. And she said, Mom, you have to read it. So I sat down one rainy weekend and didn't put it down till I finished. It was really good. Nice. I can't even tell you about it because I don't want to give anything away. It's just
That's the best kind. Yeah.
Really, really great.
Okay. So my last question is, do you have a call to action for the audience? How can people who don't live in Lexington help the International Book Project?
Oh gosh, for people that don't live in Lexington, well, you can go to our website, intlbookproject.org, and you can press that big yellow box that says donate. And we've got a box just for the Ukraine project because we're still collecting money, and all this money will go for books, whether they're books printed in Ukrainian now, the actual books in English that we're shipping. We've got an opportunity to have a bunch of Kindles donated from Amazon. So yesterday, my idea was calling Maria and saying, are there books that can be downloaded onto Kindles in Ukrainian? Like if we could send you the Kindles, and do we have to pay for those? So I'm working on Amazon to get a whole lot of, they're offering to donate 250 Kindles, but I feel like we should be able to get more Kindles.
Yeah, that's
so
incredible.
We can do it on all different fronts.
Yeah.
So donating books, just any kind of books that, that's harder for people that don't live here. We do have people that pack up books in boxes and ship them to us, but shipping books is expensive because they're heavy. So really the most impactful thing that people could do to get involved is to donate money. And if someone has a specific project, they can send us a check and with a note saying, I want my money to be used for a partner, in Lesotho or in Nepal. I mean, we have partners in all these countries that are asking us for books.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I'm so happy that we got to have this conversation. I did a ton of research ahead of time to prepare for this, but I still learned a lot coming in to do the tour and then talking to you. This has been really informative. I'm just so happy that an organization like the International Book Project exists and that you're doing such great work and you have such a long history of doing this great work. So just thank you so much for coming on to talk to me today.
Well, thank you. And a podcast called One for the Books. What is not to like about that?
Thanks. Okay, so to our audience who are watching today, be kind, read books, and hit the subscribe button below for more bookish content to come. And we'll see you next time.
Bye. Thanks, Sandra.